Welcome to WestFest 2021. We would like to acknowledge that the land on the Ohio State University occupies the ancestral and contemporary territory of the Shawnee, Potawatomi, my brain is not with it today, Delaware, Miami, Peoria, Seneca, Wyandotte, Ojibwe, and Cherokee peoples. Specifically, the university resides on land ceded in the 1795 Treaty of Greenville and the forced removal of tribes through the Indian Removal Act of 1830. We want to honor the resiliency of these tribal nations and recognize the historical context that has and continues to affect Indigenous peoples of this land. WestFest is The Ohio State University's annual celebration of science, engineering, sustainability, and outreach. This program is made possible through a grant from the Ohio State Energy Partners. I am Wayne Schlingman. I will be behind the scenes making sure everything goes smoothly. If you share about WestFest on social media, please use the hashtag OSU WestFest, all one word. We have a few short announcements to share before the program starts to ensure that all attendees have the best experience possible. We are happy to be able to provide captioning for all WestFest programs this year. Viewers have the ability to enable or disable the captions to suit their needs. In order to not interfere with the captioning, we have turned off the chat. Instead, we will be using the Q&A throughout the program to communicate. We definitely want to hear from you, so feel free to add your comments, questions, and thoughts into the Q&A. We will be checking that periodically throughout today's program. Finally, don't forget that the digital events passports are available for download from our website. Attend programs, complete challenges, and submit your passports for a chance to win WestFest prizes. go.osu.edu/WestFest passport. You are currently attending Water, Climate, and Conservation, which is being presented by David Celebrezzi from the Columbus GreenSpot. I am now going to turn it over to David to get the program started.
Great. Thank you, Wayne. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Go ahead.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. And I want to thank Wayne. I want to thank OSU WestFest for inviting me to talk about water. As Wayne mentioned, I'm Dave Celebrezzi out of Public Utilities here at the City of Columbus. I coordinate our GreenSpot program, which inspires, educates, recognizes, and celebrates, really, those that adopt sustainable practices, both households, businesses, community groups, etc. You can check more about GreenSpot online at columbusgreenspot.org. But today, I have the honor to show you a little bit about how much water is in the world. Now, obviously, if I was going to show you like a realistic how much water is in the world, we would be like in outer space right now, and we'd be watching the Earth rotate, right? And but instead, because we don't have the budget for that right now, I have this gallon jug filled with water, Columbus tap water to be exact. And what's interesting too is how we think about things. So with all the water in the world, all the, we say oceans, we say there's different oceans. One way to think about that is there's really one ocean. It's all connected, right? But there are different basins, there are different sections of that ocean, like the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, Pacific, etc. So it's kind of an interesting way to think about it. But this will represent all the water in the world. So this represents all the water in the ocean. This represents all the water in the ice caps, all the water that's in glaciers, which unfortunately that is melting. All the wetlands and streams and all that. So keep that in mind, gallon jug. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to try not to pour this on myself. I'm going to open up the top here, and I have a measuring cup. So I'm going to measure out about half a cup of water. And I'll tell you what that represents here in a second, but let's go ahead and do this. So far, so good. Oh, I did spill a little bit, but well, that's okay. It's water. So as you can see, I filled this up just about, I know it's kind of difficult to see and I'm not holding it very steady, but it's about half a cup of water. So what half a cup of water represents is all the fresh water that's in the world. So this represents all of the water that's in those ice caps, in the glaciers, all the wetlands and streams in the world, as you can imagine. That's, when you're talking about water, especially all the water in the world, I mean, you're talking trillions upon trillions of gallons and stuff like that. So This water, I know what you're probably asking is, well, what's all this water then? This is all the kind of like the salt water. So this is the water that's in the ocean. So a lot of it, all this we can't drink. Now there are some technologies coming online that can desalinate the water, but they're not up to large enough scale, if you will. So this is all the salt water. Can you drink salt water? The answer is no. Well, you can, but it's not going to taste very good. It's going to make you sick. If you've ever been to the ocean and swam in the ocean and got salt water up your nose and all that, it's no fun. I don't recommend it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this cup, which represents all of the, this half a cup, that represents all of the fresh water on Earth. And I'm going to take a teaspoon. I'm going to take 4 teaspoons of water out of there. I'm going to put it into another cup. So, and this is something that you can kind of do at home, which is kind of fun. You can show mom or dad or your brothers or sisters. You could do the same thing here. So I'm going to go ahead and do 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you know what? I do a much better job of not spilling it when I'm using something like this versus trying to pour it. All right. So this is the 4 tablespoons that I took out of there, and this represents all the water that is not frozen in the ice caps or the glaciers. So this is all the fresh water, right? So all the fresh water is really that 1 cup, and then we have a little bit less than half a cup, actually a lot less than half a cup, that is fresh water that is not locked up in the ice caps and glaciers. And remember, this is all the salt water that's on Earth that we can't drink. And most plants don't like salt water either. All right, so now that we have that, we are going to get our reusable straw, which you might have one of these at home. I have a fancy dancy slide, like a microscope slide, and it's called a recess slide. Not because it's going out and partying and stuff like that for recess, but if you look, that little thing in the middle there, you can't see it. That's like a divot, so it holds things a little bit better than if it was just completely flat. All right, so I'm going to take my reusable straw. I'm going to put it in all the fresh water that is not locked up in ice caps or glaciers or anything like that. And I'm going to, I'm going to grab a drop of that. Easy way to do that, stick this in here, put your finger on the top. That creates a little vacuum thingy or suction so the water doesn't come out. And then I'm going to put 1 drop on the eyedropper. Again, I'm going to try not to get water all over myself. Well, I kind of was successful. I got too much water. Dump a little bit of that out. Okay. Now, I can't show you this, otherwise I'm going to ruin my computer. Actually, I might be able to do this. See, this is on the fly. All right. So this is obviously a little bit more than a drop of water. Okay. But basically, that is all the water that we have that's clean and fresh, that's not polluted, not locked up in the ice caps or in glaciers. So this is the fresh water that we can treat to drink, and that we can use, for watering things and everything like that. So we went from a whole gallon of water, representing all the water on Earth, to 1 drop of really that's accessible water for us to drink, to treat, to be, so we can drink it. So as you can see, globally, we really do need to start conserving some of our water. Before I move on to the next part of the presentation, I want to ask if anybody has any questions regarding water on Earth.
If you do have any questions, please type them into the Q&A.
And while you're typing in, I'm going to have some of Columbus's own tap water myself in my reusable GreenSpot water bottle.
Doesn't look like we have any questions typing in, so I guess we can keep going.
All right. Well, now the tables are turned, folks, and I'm going to ask you questions. So we have 3 questions for you, and Wayne, it's a poll question. So Wayne's going to put the first one up on the screen here. So Columbus provides clean water to Columbus residents as well as people outside of Columbus, believe it or not. So if you live in a suburb, maybe it's Bexley, maybe it's Gahanna, you're actually drinking water that we treat. But how many people do you think drink Columbus water? Do you think it's 840,000 people? Do you think it's 1 million people? Or do you think it's 1.2 million people? So go ahead and click on whichever one you want to pick. Now, I can't vote because it says host and panelists cannot vote. And I know the answer, so it'd be kind of cheating since I made up the question, right? All right, so Wayne, what answers do we get? Anybody?
Yes, it looks like we are currently split between 1 million people and 1.2 million people.
All right, well, that's a good split. So basically, what the answer is 1.2 million people that use our drinking water. So that's a lot of people. We need to make sure that it is fresh and clean and no pollutants are getting in there. And we do that through 3 different water plants here in town. In fact, one of them, and actually you're probably not going to be able to see that, but we have one up on Morse Road, the Hep Cremine water plant. We have the Dublin Road water plant, which is near where I'm at. I'm at 910 Dublin Road, and kind of like the headquarters for public utilities, and the water plant's right next door. Then we have the Parsons Avenue water plant. They treat all that water to make it safe to drink. All right, let's pull up the next question. All right, so Columbus has 3 water treatment plants, as I mentioned before, that make water safe to drink and use. These plants, I already explained them. How many or how much water do they process on an average or per year? So go ahead and think about that. And Wayne, I can't remember if you have access to the answers to these or not.
I don't have the access to the answers to these. So these are all questions for me to answer too.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I think I know the answer to this one.
It looks like our guests are guessing or voting for 51.5 billion gallons per year.
Well, that is correct. So that's how much water that is treated. So that's a lot of water that is treated that we make safe to drink. So let's go to the third question. How much wastewater do you think our 2 wastewater plants treat? Now, wastewater is basically, it includes water that goes down the drain. Anything in your home that has a drain and the water goes down there, it goes to one of our wastewater treatment plants to treat before we can put it out into the river. And when we do put it out into the river, we monitor that water to make sure that it's clean when it's going out to the river. So it's not polluted water going out to the river. It also includes, other types of water. Sometimes water overflows in the system, although we are treating that through our Columbus Blueprint project that is taking care of the sanitary sewage overflow. That's a whole nother presentation, so I won't get into that. But as you can see, how much wastewater do we treat? Is it 49 billion, 59 billion, or 70 billion? What are folks saying?
It looks like our attendees are split between 59 billion gallons per year and 70 billion gallons per year.
All right, well, we got a smart crowd. So it's in the 70s. So it's like, I think it's over 78 billion gallons of water a year that we treat. So that's a lot of water that we make sure, wastewater, that we make sure is safe before we put it out into the stream. But that also shows that there's a lot of opportunity for conservation. Before I talk about conservation, I wanted to mention the Great Columbus Experiment. And this is something I'm just going to give you a little factoid about that, and you can do some more research on that. But the Columbus Experiment was at the turn of the 19th century, so basically in 1800s, the early 1800s, I believe. And what happened was there was a cholera, which is a waterborne illness that people were getting, not just in Columbus, but pretty much anywhere in the United States at that time. And it managed to, it killed a lot of people. It was that serious. And it killed a US senator. Like, he drank some water, he croaked. So that was such an embarrassment for Columbus. And Columbus at the time, I can't remember the exact number of people that were in Columbus, but nowhere near the million people that are here now. We're talking maybe 100,000 people. But what happened was there was this great effort. People came together, scientists came together, and they figured out a way to treat water. And so within a 2-year span, the deaths from, I think it was cholera, plummeted from, from dozens to maybe over hundreds to zero because of this new way of treating water. And the two of the people that were responsible for it were Clarence and Charles Hoover. That name might sound familiar because we have the Hoover Reservoir here in the area, which is named after them. So, and that treatment system was replicated around the world. So because of something that happened here in Columbus and the dedication of people here in Columbus, people's lives were saved all around the world from that. So you could always look it up. The Columbus experiment is pretty cool. So let's move on to our next topic here. And I should stop to say, are there any questions? If not, I will keep talking and talking
I
away.
don't see any in the Q&A right now, so feel free to keep going. If you do have questions, just pop them in there and I'll interrupt David and we'll get your questions answered.
Awesome. So one thing about our reservoir I wanted to mention before I talk about climate change is that the recreational access to our reservoirs, basically over 2 million people or use those reservoirs for recreational activity. So you can go boating, you could go fishing, things like that. So they really are a resource. And this is the 3 reservoirs, the O'Shaughnessy, the Hoover Reservoir, which I mentioned earlier, and the Griggs Reservoir. And of course, they have a lot of wetlands around them, and you might know wetlands because they filter out pollution before it gets to that water source. They are a haven for all sorts of wildlife, from all sorts of birds to amphibians and obviously fish and things like that. They help with that. And they also help with climate change. They help store carbon. They help keep a cooler environment. When you have a lot of trees, it's a cooler environment than if you have no trees. Here in Columbus, we have the spectrum, to be honest. We have some areas that have very low tree canopy cover, and it's a lot hotter on summer days in those areas than in other areas of Columbus that have a 40, 50, 60% canopy cover. I experienced that just, today, or when I ride my bike to work. Sometimes I go up to High Street to take the bus, and I notice a difference in temperature because I live down by the river. And then like when I go home, vice versa, there's usually at least a couple degree difference. It's cooler down by the river because you have the trees, you have the river and the wind, things like that. In terms of how many miles there are of our reservoirs, of shoreline, can you take a guess? And this is, we didn't do a poll question for this, but type it in the question and answers. How many miles of shoreline do you think are in those 3 reservoirs? All right, anybody answering?
I don't see, oh, I see a guess of 5 miles.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, I'll tell you the answer. The answer is 88 miles of shoreline when you look at those 3 reservoirs. So it's quite a lot of shoreline to manage. And we have a whole watershed division or section rather that is responsible for the watershed, for those, to making sure that that water stays nice and healthy, and we educate people about how to do that. And that kind of gets to climate change a little bit. And climate change, human-induced climate change, we see it's happening now. And we know that in some areas of the country, they're going to see more wildfires, like out west. They're going to see more water shortages, like in the Southwest, more intense hurricanes, like on the East Coast and the Gulf of Mexico. For the Midwest here, in Columbus in particular, they anticipate that we're going to have hotter summers, kind of more intense heat waves, which of course are bad, right? It's bad for people because people with breathing ailments, or if you don't have air conditioning, I mean, it can be a very serious situation that you're in. And also more intense downfalls, so rainfalls. So you have, like back in the day, we would have these rain soaker events that it would just kind of rain. It was kind of a nice rain, But now we're getting these more intense downfalls, rainfalls. And that's problematic for a couple reasons. One is that it can kind of strip off some of the topsoil on the banks of the rivers and things like that. And that goes into the river, and that creates pollution, believe it or not. Sediment is the #1 pollutant in Ohio waterways, and that and like construction mud. So there's things like that we're seeing with climate change. One way in which we can take an active role to combat climate change is to reduce our carbon footprint. And part of that is water conservation, and that's what I want to talk about here. And actually, I have another question for you, and that is like, what do you think that you can do to conserve and protect water? I have the little cheat sheet here in which I have what we can all do, but I want to hear from you first because you might have an idea that I haven't thought of before. So I'll give you a second. I'm going to take another drink of Columbus water, and you can type it in the question and answer. All right, so we get any bites?
Nothing yet, but I know one of the things that I can do, we talked a little bit about before we jumped in here, is just being smart about how you water, when you water, because that takes less energy in order to, clean up that water before I stick it in my plants or, let it run down the driveway. So that's a big thing. And here we have another comment that says, make the most out of the water when you do laundry. Don't do small loads.
That's a great point. That's a very great point. You could save gallons of water by doing just that. And Wayne, we were talking earlier that, we're fortunate that Columbus is a water-rich area. Ohio in general is a water-rich area, but that doesn't mean we need to be wasteful with the water. It actually proves that there's actually a lot of opportunities for water conservation. So like, yeah, doing loads of laundry only when they're full, or if you don't have a full load, making sure you're putting it on that small load setting on the washer machine. It could be, turning out the water when you brush your teeth. Sounds kind of silly, but you could actually save 2 to 5 gallons of water a day just by doing that. When you multiply that by 365 days in a year, that adds up. And if you're doing that and your friends are doing that, it adds up even faster. And that's something to remember, is that, when we're talking about conservation, there's different aspects of it. There's kind of like your business side of conservation, which businesses need to conserve too. And there's also the resident side, the individual side. Talking a little bit more about the individual side today. But yeah, turning off the water when you brush your teeth. Even keeping showers to 5 minutes or less. And if you can't do that, because sometimes I'm out talking to people and they're like, they have longer hair than me, and they're like, no, I can't do that. So I tell them, well, do you have a water efficient shower head? If you don't, maybe get one of those. So therefore, again, you're saving water. You could save hundreds of gallons of water by just doing that, keeping the shower to 5 minutes or less. If you have leaks, and here, this is a really cool and easy way to check for leaks. So I'll use this since I have it, but you could use a mug or a cup. But if you put this just under your sink, right, or not under your sink, but under your faucet, just put it in the sink and come back in an hour. If you see that there's water in this, that means your faucet's leaking water. In terms of the toilet, we actually have this stuff called toilet dye, that it's 2 strips, and you put those in the back of the toilet in the tank, and you wait 15 minutes. And if you see any of that dye in the bowl, that means the flapper in the back of the toilet is leaking water. You can actually do this experiment with cola, like a dark cola. I call it pop, right? But not everybody calls it pop. Some people call it soda, whatever that is. But you don't want to use food coloring, because food coloring can stain the back of the tank of the toilet or the bowl. And it'll in order to get it to all go through, you'll be flushing like 5 or 6 times, and that kind of defeats the purpose of conserving water. So try to avoid the food coloring. Another couple tips, because I know we're running out of time, is if you have a pet, how many people have a cat or a dog, and you have their water dish? We have 3 cats. We have 3 special needs cats at our place. So we have a big old bowl of water. And one thing we try to do, now we're not perfect with it, and that's something to remember, is we don't need a few people doing everything. We need everybody doing a little bit, and that way it adds up quicker. But we'll take that water, because we change the water out daily, and we'll water our plants with it, that old water. or we'll just toss it out we'll throw the water out the front door into the grass, or into the bushes. So it's a way in which that water, and Wayne mentioned this earlier, it's not going down the drain. So the city's not having to expend resources and energy to treat that water. It's going to beneficial use. If you have a rain barrel, that's another example. And a rain barrel is basically a giant barrel, 55 gallons, that you can connect to a downspout. So when the rain hits the roof, it goes down, kind of goes down into the downspout, and it'll collect in that rain barrel. And you could use that water to water native plants and like your grass if you want to. We don't encourage people to use the rain barrel water for their vegetable garden though, just because you're getting some pollution coming off of the roof, like from shingles and things like that. But yeah, those are some things that you can do to conserve water at home. Even, participating in a litter pickup. We have a great program here at the city called Keep Columbus Beautiful, and they do litter pickups because you're keeping that litter from going into the waterways, from going down into the sewer, and some of our sewers go directly out to rivers. So if you see something that goes down a sewer, chances are that's not being filtered. That's going right out into the river. So we want to make sure that stays clean and clear. All right, well, I've been talking for a little bit here. I'll stop for a second. I know we have about 2 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions you want to ask?
Go ahead and type it into the Q&A. This is your chance.
While you're doing that, if you do happen to notice a leak at home, make sure you tell your mom or dad so it can be addressed right away. Because it might, that little drip might not seem like much, but when that's doing that all day long, it doesn't take much for that to add up to several gallons of water that you're wasting. You're wasting money, and it's contributing to your climate footprint, to be honest, because that water has to be treated. So we're using energy to treat that water.
Here, we have a great question. Why is sediment considered a pollutant in our waterways?
Sure. So sediment that's coming off of the banks and things like that, it's going into the water, and it's a couple of different reasons why. It's increasing the turbidity, which is like kind of how far you can see in the water. So there's a lot of suspended sediment in there, which is bad for aquatic animals, fish and macroinvertebrates and all that. But also when it rains, the water that's going down the sewer is coming off our streets. And so there's oils on our streets. There's all sorts of pollution on the street. And when it rains, it washes some of that into the sewers and out into the river. So now you're getting like oils in the river and things of that nature. And obviously, or like spilled gasoline, at a gas station, maybe somebody spills gasoline, or if you're, filling up your lawnmower at home and you manage to spill some gasoline, it's important to clean that up. Otherwise it will run off and can get into our water systems. Yeah, good question.
All right, well, since we're at the end of time, I want to say thank you to David for what an excellent presentation, but thank you all for attending today's program. WestFest will continue through Saturday, October 16th, so the end of this week, with a lot of great programs planned each day. There's still time to register for each of the other programs at our event website at go.osu.edu/westfest. If you have any questions about the event, feel free to email us at westfest@osu.edu. Thank you all for coming, and thank you again, David, for a great presentation.
Thank you. Cheers.